In February 2026, the sitting U.S. vice president posted a message on social media referring to the Armenian Genocide. Within hours, it was deleted. The events themselves happened more than 110 years ago. The word describing them is still live enough, right now, to be typed by a head of state and then quietly taken back. Beginning in 1915, the Ottoman Empire's government deported and killed a large portion of its Armenian population through massacre, starvation, and death marches into the Syrian desert. Armenia and most historians who study the period put the death toll at around 1.5 million. Turkey disputes both that figure and the idea that it was premeditated, while not disputing that massive numbers of Armenians died. The word used to describe mass killings aimed at destroying a group, genocide, was coined in the 1940s partly with this exact case in mind. Today, more than 30 countries and numerous parliaments formally recognize the events as genocide. Turkey, the successor state to the Ottoman Empire, formally does not. April 24, 1915's Ottoman authorities arrest and later execute several hundred Armenian intellectuals, community leaders, and clergy in Constantinople. The date Armenians worldwide now mark every year as the start of the genocide. Over the following 2 years, deportation orders empty Armenian communities across Anatolia. The U.S. ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, Henry Morgenthau, cables Washington in real time describing what he calls a campaign of race extermination. After the war, Ottoman military courts convict several organizers in absentia for wartime massacres, a fact each side reads differently. 1920's Treaty of Sèvres references Armenian statehood but is never ratified. The 1923 Treaty of Lausanne, mentions none of it. In the 1940s, Polish Jewish jurist Raphael Lemkin coins the word genocide, citing the Armenian case as one of the examples that convinced him a new legal term was needed. The 1948 UN Genocide Convention that follows cannot, by its own terms, apply retroactively to either the Armenian or the Jewish catastrophe that inspired it. Recognitions arrive slowly and unevenly. Uruguay in 1965, France in 2001, Germany's parliament in 2016, the U.S. Congress in 2019. In 2021, Joe Biden becomes the first sitting U.S. president to use the word genocide in office. In 2026, his vice presidential successor's own social media post using the same word survives online for less than a day. For Armenians, this isn't a dispute about ambiguous history. It's a name their families have carried since before their grandparents were born. An estimated 1.5 million dead, entire communities marched into the desert without food or water, is the baseline fact taught in Armenian schools and etched into diaspora memory from Los Angeles to Beirut to Yerevan. Recognition, in Armenia's own words, isn't only about the past. Armenia's foreign ministry has said directly that recognizing the genocide matters for the security of the Armenian people today, and for suppressing what it calls new manifestations of the same ethnic cleansing logic. Language Armenian officials have explicitly connected to watching, within living memory, another Armenian population leave another homeland, Nagorno-Karabakh, in 2023. For many Armenians, a world that still hedges on the word from 1915 is a world that has already shown it might hedge again. Turkey's foreign ministry has published its own account of 1915 directly, and it does not deny that vast numbers of Armenians died. What it disputes is intent and framing. Its position states plainly that no authentic evidence exists of a premeditated plan by the Ottoman government to destroy the Armenian population, and that Ottoman society did not harbor the kind of organized racial hatred such a plan would require. Instead, Turkey's account attributes the deaths to wartime conditions exacerbated by internal strife, local groups seeking revenge, banditry, famine, epidemics, and a collapsing state apparatus in the middle of a losing world war, and notes that officials who committed abuses during the deportations were in fact court-martialed by the Ottoman government itself. It emphasizes that large numbers of Turks and other Muslims died in the same years and region, and that Armenian volunteer units fought alongside invading Russian forces, in what one Armenian leader of the time himself described as hope for an independent homeland, carved from a defeated empire. For Turkey, calling this genocide, A specific, legally defined crime treats a genuinely two-sided wartime catastrophe as a one-sided crime, and it rejects that framing as both legally and historically wrong. Here's the part that doesn't fit neatly into either government's account. The word genocide itself exists partly because of this case, and the evidence for it was being cabled to Washington in real time by an actual eyewitness. Yet, the country receiving those cables took more than 100 years to officially use the word, and only for one presidential term. Bill Clinton's and George W. Bush's administrations actively worked to shelve congressional resolutions recognizing the genocide. Barack Obama campaigned promising to say the word, then had his own administration lobby against saying it once in office. Every time the stated reason wasn't new doubt about the historical record, it was Turkey's value as a NATO ally hosting U.S. air bases. Joe Biden broke the pattern in 2021. By 2026, the pattern reasserted itself well enough that his own vice presidential successor deleted an accidental reference to it within hours. What determines whether this word gets said, in other words, has rarely tracked the strength of the evidence. It has tracked whatever a government currently needs from Ankara. Last episode asked what a guarantee is worth once defending it stops being convenient. This one asks a version of the same question about language itself. What is a historical fact worth once the word for it becomes a foreign policy lever instead of a description? Armenia and Turkey each have an internally coherent account of 1915, one built on family memory and a security argument extending into this decade, one built on wartime chaos, mutual loss, and a legal objection to a specific word. But the countries deciding whether to use that word at all were rarely weighing those two accounts against each other. They were weighing an alliance. The evidence didn't change for 110 years. Who was willing to say it out loud kept changing anyway. A word coined partly because of this exact case, cabled home in real time by a man who watched it happen, and still too costly for some governments to type out loud in 2026. Next time, we head to the South Atlantic, where two countries fought an actual shooting war over islands that between them had fewer sheep farming residents than a small town, and where one side still insists every year that the map is wrong.